Hey, it's Kat again, continuing this conversation about the depth and breadth and possibilities of finding and working with the sovereign soul. And one thing I wanted to start with today with the part 2 of this article. Again, I wrote it many months ago, and so it's inexorably connected to my work with the archetypes of midlife. It actually was birthed, this whole article was birthed out of my working deeply with the archetypes of midlife and exploring how they would lead me in different directions, each of the 9 archetypes offering me a specific perspective, insight, guidance, and that all 9 of them actually were contributing to this larger body of work, this larger directional invitation to recognize and honor the sovereign soul. The idea that the sovereign soul, my sovereign soul, has its own identity, its own knowing, its own source, and that it lives within me, it lives within you, that it is a source of healing and wholeness, but it also is a source of evolutionary growth, and that the archetypes of midlife are actually designed to bring us into new knowledge, bring us into a stronger capacity to draw on the sovereign soul as source, as tangible, applied source, the ability to open that window at any time that we need it and come into a strong, aligned connection with the sovereign soul as perhaps a compass, as a wayfinder, as a source, a guiding source. So I thought that was really interesting and wanted to bring that in because I didn't mention that on yesterday's video. I think that our experiences change us. Our experiences through a long life change us. And wherever we are in our life as adults, we feel the length of life because we remember and are called back to different moments in our life that are meaningful to us or that have changed us, that have altered us. We also, as human beings, turn back to the past to remember, to restore that which was broken or wounded. And we come back into those places to consciously create avenues and pathways of healing, of deepening our understanding. But when we are recognizing and honoring that we can look through these different lenses of the self, because our own cycles of self-awareness will shift and change perspective. What I knew a week ago about something I'm re-remembering, I might actually have already come into new knowledge about a week later. So I'm always looking through different perspectives and different lenses. But traveling with cycles of self-awareness also bring us to considering these different parts of self that could be expressed as the human self, the soul self, the whole self, the sacred self, and the sovereign self. So when you hear those 5 types of self, those 5 ways of traveling with your own soul, with your own sovereignty, with your own guidance, and also with the inner guidance and the outer guidance of archetypes, of counsel, of creative ways, all the different channels that we use to explore and express. I think recognizing the lens, oh, my human self is so active right now. I'm really being called to recognize that my human self is the lens I'm feeling and looking through and operating around, which is very different than looking through the lens of the soul self. or the sovereign soul. So the soul self might be, for me, might be an inner guidance, that part of myself that is actively connected with vulnerability, with fragmentation, with healing, with the sense of parts of the whole, and that the soul allows me to guide my life as a healing energy, in the energy of healing, that perspective is important to my soul self. So how are all these different perspectives actually leading us in different directions at any given time? And can we identify these different energies as being like our own inner compass? And by breaking down and seeing parts of the whole, or applying the fact that we have these beautiful potential archetypal patterns wanting to collaborate with us, wanting to guide us, wanting to inform us about how we're operating within the patterns of being human, like the edge walker or the edge dancer. How does that energy guide me in this particular moment with this particular experience within this part of my life when I feel like I'm being drawn along an edge to do something new, to leap, to take that leap of faith, to enter into the unknown. So perhaps if that energy is resonating, but I recognize I'm being called, that the human self feels that one way, but the whole self feels it a completely different way. The sovereign soul has this big picture view that could completely reorient my relationship with the edge dancer. That becomes a really interesting pivot point. And I personally love that we can take our experiences through these spirals of time and risk things that feel edgy, unravel something back to the bone to see it clearly, to rebuild it, to live it in a brand new way. I love that we can create these cross-pollinated explorations through creative process and creative depth, and that it brings us into a new awareness of a divine design. If there's anything that I want my sovereign soul to source for me, it's getting more and more information about the divine design of who I am, why I'm called, what I'm doing here, how I want to live, how I choose to live, what I know when I open to this kind of information. That feels really good to me. I'm wondering what is exciting to you about this part 2 of the article, about the archetypes of midlife, this invitation to do work specifically guiding you towards the sovereign soul as source. And I'm wondering if you'd just reach out to me by email, send the email back to me with some thoughts. Join me for this next journey if you are intrigued, if you're inspired, if you're feeling called. I've been doing this work on my own for many, many months, over a year, in fact, and I cannot wait to come into community to explore these creative conversations with you. I think this is the most exciting time in our life. We talk about midlife, which is really often starting in our 30s, sometimes even earlier, and moving us through our 40s and our 50s and our 60s and our 70s. And at some point, we each feel a transition time where we feel we're on the cusp of the wisdom years, or they're coming closer. But for some of you, you're clear you're in midlife, but you're operating midlife in the middle of midlife or the early years of midlife. This is really powerful powerful season of life, I think, and so sort of stretches us and it challenges us in so many different ways. There's so many different roles and responsibilities and thresholds and things that trip us up and confound us and confuse us and stop us in our tracks. So it takes a lot to move through midlife. And I think the companioning of the sovereign soul, of the archetypes of midlife that bring us and travel with us right through to the wisdom years, I believe these are the companions, the guides, each of them distinctive for each of us, who will work with us for decades and lead us and guide us and hold us and collaborate with us, always with a sense of soul growth in the midst, in the middle, in the center of the center. That is the purpose of being alive. And being alive in these complex times where we're not just called to experience the human experience, but we're called to action around who we are in the world, how we contribute, what we want to do within our lifetime, within the lifelines of these different cycles of life. It's so rich. It's such a rich conversation. So I think we need to do it with one another. I want to do it with you. So come join me in Ignite Archetypes of Midlife if it inspires you, if you feel drawn to it. I just sent off all of the new models and maps and materials that I've created for this course. Brand new cards, maps, mats, beautiful tools to use for working with all 9 of the archetypes of midlife. And so I'm very excited. I'm going to introduce that to you next. So look for the next email. And I'm going to share some of the beautiful new symbols, images, cards, and materials that I've created for our Ignite journey. In the meantime, enjoy the part 1 and the part 2 of the Sovereign Soul conversation and see what sparks your creative inquiry.